Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot once again. Today, in this episode, we will take a peek into everyday China and we'll see how India is back at it again. Right? It's typical of this cartoon where we are putting water to quench the fire of the dragon, and Xi Jinping is quite upset about it. Right? At the outset, I'd like to put across to you uh, this particular graph, which was a result of a study by the Japanese. Right? What did they say in this? What they have very clearly said is that China's GDP will not overtake that of US. 2020, the forecast was that the GDP of China will cross that of USA around 2030. In 21, the forecast was it will go back in 2035. But today's forecast is it will never happen. Simultaneously, very interestingly, in this, the forecast is that by 2025, just about 3 years away, India's GDP will cross that of Japan. And by 2035, we will be a $10 trillion economy, which means you will be a big player in the global stage. And that is something which the Chinese are cognizant of. And that is why you see this. I saw this tweet by Derek Grossman. He says China has always treated India with utter disrespect and described it as an inferior power. Here's the latest example of Chinese propaganda portraying India as being unsure and confused about its strategy. And this is a picture from the Global Times, right? And they want to portray India as being unsure, confused, and inferior. And this is something which we have to take notice of and behave accordingly. Right. There's this interesting article from the Diplomat which says, how is India viewed in China? And it says in the headline itself that the Chinese view India in a very complicated manner. And even this reinforces what Derek Grossman says, that they view us with a sense of superiority and self confidence. But there are many issues in this which the writer has brought out. The writer is a Chinese, uh, after all. He says India and Russia have a higher relationship called a special and privileged strategic partnership. He also points out that there are more deals between India and Russia, arms deals, than between China and Russia. So their problem is why doesn't USA haul up India over sending arms to Russia, but it hauls up China or accuses China of supporting Russia during the Ukraine war. Right? They're worried. There's a widespread perception in China that India is the favorite of the West, whereas China is its target. They're worried and they wonder how did India manage this? And they also worried why is India's circle of international friends so big? Combine it with the fact that you're going to be a $10 trillion economy in about 10 years. You're the darling of the West. You have a great circle of international friends. You put all these three things together, and China needs to be worried. In this article, it also says India is seen as underdeveloped. Hence, it does not pose a challenge and threat to many countries, and that the West does not take India seriously. Therefore, New Delhi can enjoy peaceful ties with Washington. It's a very cockeyed kind of a logic, right? That we are not seen as a threat. Obviously, China doesn't know the animosity which we had with USA, and there's a lot of distrust which is still there in the Indo-US relationship, and mainly due to Pakistan. And they view that China is very strong, and hence the West is afraid of them because they want to ensure that China does not surpass them. It's their view, however lopsided it might be. But that's a view which we have to factor in. That's the way they look at us. We are the darling of the West. We are weak, confused, and they must view us with a sense of superiority. There is also a view, this is very interesting. The strengthening of cooperation between China, India, and Russia can cope with the pressure of the West. This is a trilateral relationship which used to be spoken of in the last decade. RIC, Russia, India, China. And their logic is that the West still does not fully trust India. But what they miss out is India does not trust China at all. Okay. Yet another interesting aspect. Should China be closer to India or Pakistan? Okay. And they view that there is a lot of scope for cooperation between India and China, right? And the trade, India China trade, is far in excess of the trade between Pakistan and China. But China cannot forget Pakistan because it was Pakistan who helped them patch up with USA, and a lot of China's wealth has been created because Pakistan helped them. Right. The last thing is important. They feel that the idea of using Pakistan to restrain India is becoming unrealistic. And they also say that the gap between Pakistan and India is becoming wide. In essence, even if you support Pakistan, it will not be of use against India. And that means that China has to deal with India on a one to one basis more and more. That realization is coming in despite the superiority XYZ. It's a very, very interesting article, right? And this article is quite in the news because of the fact that the Chinese seem to be quite fascinated by our prime minister. They've given him a nickname called Lao Xian, right? It's some kind of a immortal man with weird abilities. So he's taken a larger than life image in China, which is good. They're amazed by him. All in all, you combine the fact that our economy is going ahead and the facts which have been mentioned in this article, China's view of India is changing. And that is what I wanted to put across. And we have to behave accordingly. Our strategic behavior has to change. And overall, China has, or the Chinese people, have no malice towards India. After all, historically, we have had no problem except the border. And that border issue is only when the communists come. So the question is, if tomorrow the communists are ejected due to some reason, and a new political dispensation in India come to some understanding, will there be peace? Will there be a realignment? It just opens that question, which we should never close it. Okay. Now they're worried about Apple. Now this says that Foxconn wants to produce AirPods in India. So far, India was considered a producer for Apple items, only of the larger old generation ones. But now AirPods and things like that are the latest, which means, in fact, Apple has said that we are going to do export from India, and the Chinese factory will only be for uh, local consumption and domestic consumption of China. So they're worried. And they also, Apple has gone on and said that whatever we have learned in China, we're going to implement it in India so that we have an easier ride. Right? That also worries China because they've learned, Apple has learned it at their expense and going to implement here, which means they're going to surpass all the hurdles or circumvent all the hurdles which India can put up to them. Right? And this has gone viral in the social media. And the view is that look, any shift of Apple from China to India means it is at China's loss and India's gain. We are eating their lunch as per them. So there is going to be animosity towards India. And what's more, this article says that this move is like a weather vane. It tells the drift of the wind. With if Apple shifts, the others will follow. Already Dell has said we will quit China. Even HP has given some indication to that effect, and so are many other brands. So what happens if there's a beeline towards India? China will not be our friend. The animosity will only increase. And you're going to affect their economy, you're going to affect their livelihood, and many more things. Right? So, hence, articles like this are coming out. India won't replace China as the world's factory anytime. In this article, and otherwise also, the general trend line is India doesn't have infrastructure, it is weak, it doesn't have electricity, the bureaucrats are corrupt, you have to go through a labyrinth of processes, they don't have a work culture. All this goes to suggest the heaven of manufacturing is China. Don't go away from here, you'll make a mistake. And this kind of bashing of India will continue. All this in just a matter of 2 weeks. Is India ready to take China's place in the global economy? That's wishful thinking as per their thinking. Same logic. I also agree. India should not take place China's role in the global economy and become a manufacturer. Firstly, it will take a long time, and secondly, will suffer huge pollution which we don't need. India needs to develop on its own way in its own merit. It should not become another China. That's my proposition always. Right. And then, of course, this article on India's crackdown on pre installed smartphone apps in Xiaomi and Vivo. No Chinese apps are being allowed. It's a crackdown. It's very important because India is the only country which has banned Chinese apps wholesale. We are the only country which has banned TikTok. In USA, there's a deal going on. TikTok should become a US company and then we'll allow it, otherwise we'll close. Others have banned it in government offices and all that. But we have banned it across the board. So we banned Huawei. We also restricted Chinese businesses in India. Actually speaking, we have done far more against China than any other country. This is something we have to realize. Right. Now I'm going to switch to something else. Show you a few articles which give a clear indication that our presence across China or rather in front of China in some form is more than Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean region. This is interesting, which we have never realized. This article talks of Australia and India gaining strength in economic ties and defense matters and all that. And the next article is also similar. It says from trade to defense, Australia leans into India friendship to bat away China threat. So what does all this indicate? China is a common thread between India and Australia. India-Australia strategic partnership is growing. Chinese are worried about it because the AUKUS will come in with Australia at the helm, and Australia and India will be part of the Quad. So this is a bad equation for them, right? But importantly, this partnership enables us to deploy our assets the other side of the Malacca Strait. Another problem which they've probably indicated in some manner is that Putin likely to attend G20 summit in India as Russia frees up his schedule. He's coming here. There are some issues, but I think he'll come. Then what is likely to happen? Is there a chance of Biden and Putin meeting and coming to some peace agreement over Ukraine when he comes in September? After all, it was only in India during the G20 foreign ministers meet that Blinken and Lavrov met, even for 10 minutes. It was a communication of sorts. Can India pull something big off in September? And remember, Xi Jinping at this point of time is in Russia and he's trying his best to end the Ukraine war through his 12-point program, which the West has rejected. Can we achieve something which China is not able to do so? Especially considering the great diplomatic outreach which Xi Jinping has mounted, the stakes are high for China, right? Whatever we pull off, even if it is little, it will be great. Then, of course, this article, which I didn't know, right? G7 chair is with Japan and G20 is with India. Now, put these two together, take into account the strong Indo Japanese ties, take into account that India and Japan are part of the Quad, and it was Japan which brought India into Quad, and take into fact that the two more powerful groupings on earth are headed by India and Japan. Also take into account that India and Japan have started some kind of air exercises, even if it's a small step. China will be worried. The day since we have started this air exercises, it's only a beginning, it will only increase as we go along. Your projection into the South China Sea area will increase automatically. We have exported the BrahMos missile system to Indonesia, or rather, we are in the process of doing so. Now, look at it. Indonesia and USA have good equations, and China is troubling Indonesia in the Natuna Seas, and we are selling BrahMos to Indonesia. See the dynamic. Now, add to the fact that the BrahMos missile system is not only going to be in Indonesia, but also already with the Philippines, and it likely to go up to Vietnam. So that means with Japan at the top, you have a air-to-air exercise going. With South Korea, you already have some kind of a military cooperation through the Vajra deal, common equipment. Then you have something with your equipment is with Philippines, likely to be with Vietnam, with which you already have very good military ties, and then now Indonesia. So you're projecting something across. All this while we were under the worry that look, China is selling military equipment to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Pakistan and all that. The role is now getting even. The play field is getting even. What's more important? USA has come back into Philippines and is establishing bases out there. Once it does that, it starts operating with the Philippines armed forces. Naturally, there's a certain amount of interoperability which Philippines will develop with USA, especially with the BrahMos, right? Which means indirectly you are getting more interoperability with USA. And the BrahMos is a very significant missile system which has been given into that area. Remember, the BrahMos is a supersonic missile which flies at 3 Mach. It is just short of hypersonic. There are very few defenses against this missile for a ship. It's okay to say you have a air umbrella and all that, but not against ship. Every ship won't have a system which can protect itself against the BrahMos. So China is at risk. Now you look at the whole thing. You know, you are there. You know, in terms of taking the trade away, you're putting your weapons across, right? You're increasing the connectivity with all Indonesia, military diplomacy with Indonesia, Vietnam, South Korea, Philippines, and Japan, right? And after this, if you say that India is not doing enough against China, we'll have to rethink. Plus the fact that you're also increasing your ties with Australia. All this while your economy is shooting up. Now you see how Chinese view India, and the whole thing is different. Right? We need to have faith in ourselves that we can do as much as China does to us in a hybrid manner. That's all I have to say for this episode of Peek into Everyday China. Yeah, it's India again. Jai Hind and thank you.